Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 in our navigation tutorials. In this tutorial we're going to go through the jQuery highlights. First thing to look at is the images we're going to be using. First one is this highlight here. We're going to use a 1 pixel wide image and repeat horizontally. And the second image is this slight overlay image here to add a highlight to the bottom bar. Okay, first thing to do, open up the files you created in part 1. I'm going to start with the HTML document here. What we're going to be doing is adding two elements, a span and an EM. We're going to add these to the list item after the anchor, and we're going to give these both different backgrounds like we just went over. Leave them completely empty. This is how they'll be throughout the whole tutorial. And that's it for the HTML. Very simple. Next, let's move on to the CSS. Something I didn't mention in the previous tutorial, but is quite useful, is to add a 1 pixel drop shadow to your link. It just helps the link stand out. Okay, the first thing we're going to move on to is styling the span. The empty span is going to hold the background, which would start off with the bottom bar. So it's going to contain dark bottom highlight. Its height 2 pixels. We're going to place this in the center of the bar with no repeat. Height 2 pixels, width 100%. Okay. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to position this span absolutely so that it doesn't affect the way the anchors are displayed. In order for us to do this, we're going to have to add position relative to the holding element, which is the list item. To avoid overlapping with the divider image, we're going to have to add right 2 pixels. Obviously, if you have 100% plus 2 pixels, that's going to be more than the width of the list item. To avoid the 2 pixels which overlap to the left showing, we're going to have to add overflow hidden to the list item. We're also going to add bottom 0 so that the span displays at the bottom of the anchor. Let's preview that in our browser. You see the overlay image at the bottom. Now, in my example, I also have a background color at the bottom, so let's say blue. We have it. Let's see the actual color I use for this. Copy. Let's preview that in our browser. And that looks about right. Next thing we're going to have to do is the EM. Same sort of process. Add the background. In this case, dark overlay, which is height 34 pixels. PX, height 34 pixels. Width 100%. Position absolute, right 2 pixels, and this time bottom 2 pixels so as not to overlap with the span. If we hover over these links, we shall see they aren't active. This is because the span we just created is currently on top of the anchor. We have getting around this is to add position relative to the anchor, which allows us to give it a Z index. Make this 5 or something. Copy the Z index. And then let's make sure on the span and the EM the Z index is lower than the 5. And now the links work. Only problem remaining in the CSS is the bottom left here. We no longer have the rounded corner. To do this, we use the first child selector. We make sure the span, also known as the bottom bar, has a rounded corner in the bottom left. So let's copy this, apply it to the span, but we only want it on the bottom left corner, so what we do is top left, top right, bottom left. That, however, won't work on its own because the actual left side of the span has 2 pixels overlapping and out with the list item. So we're also going to have to make the width of this fixed. So width, let's say 75 pixels, see how that works. There, fits perfectly. Next we're going to have to make sure the opacity on these overlays is set to 0 as standard, and then in jQuery we will highlight them and make them 100. To do that we add opacity 0. We also make sure the variations for other browsers, so moz opacity 0, filter alpha opacity equals 0. And let's copy that for the span as well and preview that in our browser. And there we go, we're back to normal. Next we're going to have to move on to the jQuery. So let's open up the HTML. First thing we're going to have to do is link to the jQuery framework. I've got the online version copied, which is like that. We're also going to have to link to the JavaScript file we're about to create. So let's call that tutorial1.js and close that. Let's create a new document like JavaScript. Save as tutorial1. This is where we're going to enter our jQuery code. The first thing to do is make sure the document is ready. To do that, add the following. Anything we now place inside this, in this line here, is only going to happen when the document is ready. So the first thing we're going to have to do is select a jQuery selector. In this case, we're going to be applying these effects when the list item is hovered over. So let's put in ULV. Now we're going to do this when it's hovered. Hovered. So everything we put in here is going to be called when the list item is hovered. So let's do it. Find this. Find a span which is inside this. And let's animate that. Let's change the opacity to 1 at speed of 400 milliseconds. Let's copy that, paste, do the same for the EM, except let's change the speed. Let's make the span come in first because it's the bar, and then the EM coming on slightly later. Let's preview that in a browser. We now have the effect when the links are hovered over. However, we do not remove this when the links are not hovered over. To do that, we add another function. Like so. Copy these. Sorry. And let's animate them back to 0. Let's make the EN come out first, and span come out slightly later. Preselect to 2. Preview that in our browser. And that seems about right. Although the bottom bar seems to come out slightly too quick. So let's change this to 500. And that was perfect to me. The reason we've done these elements separate is so that the bar can come in first and then the overlay come in next. Which adds a slightly different effect if they were at the same speed. You could do this also, the bottom bar here, using just a bottom border. However, you won't be able to get the overlay, the slight overlay image in the middle, and you wouldn't be able to do this without a jQuery plugin. That's it for part 2 of our navigation tutorial. Hope you like it. You can download this navigation along with all the source code and all the other different color variations from the website. It's at the right side of the video on the page. Hope you enjoyed it, and come back for more.